What's going on, everybody, and welcome to GNR Central. And we got some news for you today. So, Appetite for Distortion did an interview with Gary Sunshine, who is from the band Circle of Power, and he was also known as Axl's guitar teacher, although he kind of wouldn't use that terminology to describe himself. He helped Axl with some guitar stuff when he was working on Chinese Democracy in the late 90s. So, here's what he had to say during the entire interview. So, he talked about how he met Axl. He said he met Axl in New York at the Cat Club through Ricky Rackman. And he said basically that he was a huge fan of Guns N' Roses back in the day. He most preferred Use Your Illusion, and he thought it was phenomenal. He said it had all the elements that he enjoyed as a musician. Gary also complimented Slash by saying he's a great guitarist, and he said he's very Jimmy Page influenced, much like himself. And he said even though Dave Navarro recorded the track "Oh My God" with him, they were never actually in the studio together at the same time. It was like Gary came in, did his parts, Dave did his parts, and that was basically it. And he said he never spoke to Dave about the song afterwards. Gary said he couldn't really hear what he played on "Oh My God." He said he probably reinforced the song. He also remembered Axl being at the session for 2 days, and maybe Del James was there as well. And he said they gave him a cassette tape of 2 or 3 other songs to think of for sessions, and there was no vocal track on it, and he didn't really know what they were going for. And he said there was very little instructions given to him on what to play. Gary also said it was nerve-wracking because the song had so many changes and sounded insane when talking about "Oh My God." He also said he redid some of the rhythm section parts, and he said he knew it was for the Arnold Schwarzenegger movie back then for the End of Days soundtrack. Gary was disappointed that more wasn't done with the song other than just for appearing on the movie soundtrack. Sounded like he wanted it to show up on Chinese Democracy. So Gary said he worked with Axl in the 90s. One of the guitar techs with Guns N' Roses called him up one day and said a high-profile guy wanted to learn some guitar in a lesson format. So Gary was hired to work with Axl on guitar, and Gary said he was asked to meet him in the studio. So Axl wanted to brush up on guitar, and it wasn't intense guitar lessons. Gary would go up to see Axl once a week at his house and bounce ideas and work on things. And Gary knew Axl was writing and being creative, and that is what really mattered to him. They worked on everything from the Beatles to Radiohead concepts, and they didn't focus on bluesy stuff too much since they'd already exhausted that with Appetite, and Axl wanted to go in a new direction. Gary also said he worked with Axl for about a month to a year, and followed, I think it was 6 months to a year, he said, and followed that he got a call to come in and do a session with Guns N' Roses, which would eventually be for "Oh My God." So he spent all that time, working with Axl on guitar, and then, it seemed like couple months after he left Axl, that's when he got the call for "Oh My God." So Gary said there was also a few other songs too he played on, and one of them might have been IRS, but he wasn't 100% sure. Gary said that Axl played guitar by ear, and he had some cool riffs and was a pretty solid guitarist. And Gary said him and Axl bonded pretty well. They talked about music and relationship and politics. And Gary said he is a shy guy himself, and he tries to stay out of the limelight, and he wanted to be respectful of Axl. That's why they never really worked together again in the future. If Axl wanted to, he said he'd be open to it, but it wasn't something he was going to press Axl to do. Gary said he also went into Buckethead's chicken coop they built for him during Chinese Democracy's recording sessions. Gary said he never got to meet Buckethead, but praised the other guys in the band like Robin Fink and Tommy Stinson, who he said were great players. Art Tavanna, who was also in on the interview, told a hilarious story that never made his article that he published on on Billboard.com. But he said there was a story that somebody told him, and he wouldn't reveal his source, that back in the 90s and 2000s, Buckethead would drive around in a white van, and in the driver's seat, he'd also have a dummy, and it would be a dummy of a girl whose throat was slit, and there was blood all over her body, and they used the carpool lane. And Gary said there was probably multiple versions of "Oh My God," but he didn't hear them. Gary said it would have been cool for the song to be on Chinese Democracy. So that's basically the interview in a nutshell. He did talk more about what Gary was up to nowadays. I didn't listen to that part of the interview, but if you guys want to listen to Brando's full interview, it's great. I've linked to it down below. So looking back at the song "Oh My God," there was a number of press releases and interviews done around that time with members of the band, and even Axl put out a press release. So apparently Robin Fink played on the song, but it seems like that's kind of a point of discussion. So when Axl put out the press release when the song came out, he said Robin's part was written by Paul Hughey and extensively manipulated by our producer Sean Bevan. Robin was not involved in the writing of the final recording, though did participate in the arrangement. So he also went on to talk about Dave Navarro, saying Dave Navarro came in and did something great on "Oh My God," and we've got a few other people come in. So Robin's departure was a setback for a while, but then it turned out to be a good thing. So Dave Navarro was interviewed by MTV News about the song, and he said there's no story. He told MTV News of how he came to hook up with Reclusive Rose. He said, "We didn't hook up at like the Rainbow." He said, "Hey, let's get together and do a song." They just called me up and I went down to the studio. I spent an hour and a half there. I played a guitar solo and that's basically it. So Navarro said it was an existing track he added while backstage at the Artist Direct Online Music Awards in '99. I played a guitar solo on it. There really wasn't much direction given to me. I think that's why they called me, because they figured they wouldn't have to give me any direction. And Navarro said that Axl would call the studio during his work on Oh My God, and from the speakerphone, Axl would tell him to play with more feeling. Now, Axl said, "When we finally got Oh My God to where it needed to be, then I got the right words to it. With Appetite, I wrote a lot of the words first, but in like Oh My God, I wrote the words second, but the music was written like Appetite. We kept developing until we got it right." Now, according to the New York Times, Axl was fussing over the song so much that he and Jimmy Iovine, who is the chairman of Interscope, and studio technicians stayed up until nearly the dawn adjusting the final mix according to the people involved, because they had to submit it for the film's soundtrack. Now, Axl revealed in 2008 that Oh My God was actually a demo. So the version that we heard was actually a demo, only at the time having just got it together. He said only Jimmy Iovine knew who wanted it to sell it to their soundtrack. "I saw segments of the movie referring to End of Days, which were good. As a whole later, not so much, but it wasn't ready yet. I did write an experimental piece inspired by the bits I'd seen called Daddy Can the Devil Do Mommy and Me." And Axl said the instrumental I wrote for End of Days is a more solo effort, at least presently. So a snippet of the song was actually featured in an advertisement at the MTV Video Music Awards Gala on September 9th, 1999, which suggests the studio team labored over it through the month of August, because the soundtrack was released on November 9th, 1999, while End of Days premiered on November 16th, 1999. So we've also got some Buckethead news. So in that great Billboard magazine article that Art Tavanna did about Chinese democracy, there was an interview with former Geffen employee Tom Zutaut, who discovered Guns N' Roses and was their A&R guy. And then he kind of had a falling out with Axl back in the 90s. And then he came back into the fold in 2001 to help finish up Chinese democracy. And he talked a bit about Buckethead and just how weird of a guy he was. So he said Buckethead was an absolutely emotionless person, says Zutaut. The only thing that allowed him to feel emotion was having things cut up and bleeding around him. So he'd cut the heads off of rubber chickens and hang them around the studio. Chinese democracy had a sociopathic tinge to it that made it an album that could become a character in the Bret Easton Ellis novel, not something to headbang to. The perplexing irony is that Axl Rose previewed Chinese democracy at a Vegas strip club in 2003. Now, what's funny is that by the time Tom Zutaut joined the Chinese Democracy Project, Buckethead had left the band because he was frustrated by what he saw as the band's inactivity. So Axl wanted him back, so Zutaut had to arrange a meeting with Brian and Bucket at a deli in LA and listens as the guitarist explained why he left. So according to him, he said there was a bit of creative tension with Roy Thomas Baker, who was the producer on Chinese Democracy after Sean Bevan left, says Zutaut. It could have well been what Roy, being an eccentric, flamboyant British rock god producer, and Buckethead being, well, a chicken. Bucket's frustrated at the whole situation, at coming into the studio every day when Axl's not even there, playing the same parts over and over, and Axl's his hero. He tells him, but he just spent a year going nowhere. He doesn't think the record will ever come out, and he just wants to move on with his life. So Zutaut told Buckethead, "You just told me how you don't feel right in the studio. What if we build a chicken coop in the studio for you to record your guitar parts?" To which Buckethead said, "If I could have my own chicken coop in the studio, my own world to live in, I could play a lot better." So 2 days later, they actually built him a chicken coop, and he brought in all his props and toys and put straw on the floor, and you could almost smell the chickens, one person said. "What I've noticed about playing in the studio for the last 3 months, doing it wherever you give, it comes out on tape," Brain says. "When I give more, I feel like I'm more into it, and then basically I have a vibe that you can hear that too. So I bring the vibe, I bring all the inspirations, I bring pictures of Bruce Lee and hang them all around the drums. For me, it's everything. It just adds extra energy, and I would definitely play better." So as the weeks went by, the chicken coop jokes started to wear thin. So Buckethead comes in and says he needs a TV so he can sit in the chicken coop and watch porn, says Tom Zutaut. And that seemed to really inspire him to record some great stuff. So one evening, Axl turned up to a session, and he sees that Bucket is running this porn, and it's pretty hardcore stuff, and Axl is really disturbed by it. So basically, Axl didn't want a guy recording on his record to be inspired by that kind of stuff. And then Axel left and Bucket was pretty despondent, and he disappeared for a few days because he was apparently really torn up about it. So that's just an interesting story about the making of Chinese democracy, and I'll probably do a full true story about the time Bucket had spent in the band and some of the weird stories. So let's go into our next piece of news. So turning now to some Slash news. So Slash, before he was heading out on tour to Asia with Miles Kennedy and the Conspirators, was spotted at the museum in LA. So they went to the Smithsonian dinosaur exhibit, and this is a photo with Frank Sidoris as well as Todd Dammit Kearns. Slash has been doing some interviews lately with some of the newspapers in Southeast Asia, and they're going to be playing there this month, as well as doing some dates down under, and before finally doing some dates across South America, and then go back to Europe in the summertime. So that does it for today's video, guys. Thanks for watching. Be sure to hit the like button and subscribe for the latest Guns N' Roses news. Take care.
Hey, this is Dizzy Reed from Guns N' Roses, and you're watching GNR Central. Yeah!